Hey vinyl community, back for another one this time. Something a little different, and it's a challenge. A thread that was posted by, the channel's name is CalicoSilver. I will actually leave a link to the video below. And it's essentially post a favorite album by an artist or band, starting at A, going all the way through Z. And I thought this at first was going to be an impossible feat, and it almost was. I started going through, and it was odd because the trickier it got, the more challenged I was to actually do it. So there were some rules for it. First of all, when it comes to the name, you have to go by surname if it's the name of an artist. If it's the name of a band, you wouldn't go with the or a. So you would just go with the first letter. With a name, you would go with the first letter of the surname. And there's a couple other rules. If you don't have anything by a particular artist or band for a particular letter, you could just show an album that started with that letter. If you didn't have that, worst case scenario is show an album that you don't think anybody else has, or very, very few people have. So I didn't thankfully get to that point, but I did accumulate an album for each. So I thought that I would share this with you. It seems fun, and hopefully if you're interested, tag along. So the first one for A is Alice Cooper. And I know some people will be thinking, well, Alice Cooper is a C. Well, today, yes, because Alice Cooper is this guy. But when this album came out in 1971, Alice Cooper was the name of the band, and they had that name for the band for their first few albums. So, love it to death. But if you're really picky going by today's standards, almonds eat a peach. Just to back up. B is Bowie. And my favorite is Hunky Dory. B was a really tough one. Could have went with Beatles. The band. That was CalicoSilver's choice. A good one. C, I went with Tago Mago by Can. And I think maybe I forgot to mention right at the top, you're supposed to, when you pick the artist or band, you're supposed to pick your favorite album by them. One of the other rules was that you actually have to have an album. You just can't say, oh, my favorite REM album is Document. You actually have to show the album. So that made it even more challenging as well, of course. This is a big one. It was a fairly easy one for me. For D, I went with Dylan, and my favorite Bob Dylan album is Blood on the Tracks. Bob Dylan is CalicoSilver's favorite artist, by the way. E was a little tricky. I went with Eno, and I went with his first album, Here Come Warm Jets. I'm not really giving an explanation for each. They're all great, and I've picked them for that reason. It'd be interesting if I tried to do this in a month from now to see how many of these are actually still the same. F, Fleetwood Mac. I went with Then Play On. Earlier bluesy, still Fleetwood Mac. Grateful Dead for G was easy. I went with American Beauty. H was tough. I had a couple of different selections. I had Hawkwind was up there. Hendrix was up there. But I'm not a huge Hendrix fan. But I went with this one, and Herbie Hancock. And while picking my favorite album from him, I went with Crossings, but Sexton was really close too. But I went with this one. I went with Maiden, Power Slave. Reminds me that copy's kind of beat. Moving on. J, Japan. And actually, you know what? I grabbed Tin Drum, and kind of in the back of my head, I was going to grab their debut album, which I really love. But let's go with Tin Drum. Tin Drum is probably their most commercially successful album. This one was a tough one for the album K. I'm at King Crimson, and I went with Lark's Tongue and Aspic, probably my favorite of theirs. Red is excellent as well, but this one's probably my favorite. L, I hope these are in order. I didn't even double check them. Little Feat, Dixie Chicken, excellent album. We are at M, and it was kind of interesting because I could have went with the guy featured in here, but I went, in fact, with the orchestra instead for M, and that is the Mahavishnu Orchestra, and this is the Intermounting Flame. Birds of Fire was really close to maybe next week, right? N. N was, if I didn't have any albums from these guys, it would have been a little bit more difficult, but thankfully I have 3 albums from them. Of those 3, this is my favorite, Noi, and this is Noi 75. Ozzy Osbourne was a brief consideration for O, but I went with Amadon by Mike Oldfield, and coincidentally, CalicoSilver's selection was also this for O. P, if you know me, it's going to be this guy. And this week it's, well, I don't know. Elvis Is Back is probably my favorite, more than from Elvis in Memphis. So I went this. This is my mono pressing of this. Great stuff. Had to be Elvis, right? Q, I like Queen, but I don't know. I think I like the talents and diversity of Quicksilver Messenger Service better. And this is their debut. Sorry about the glare. I'm just trying to hold these on an angle. R, of course, Rolling Stones, my favorite album of all time, Exile on Main Street. This was difficult. We're at S now, and I went with this album because probably of all of the bands from the 90s, this was my favorite. These guys were my favorite, Soundgarden. And Bad Motorfinger, my favorite album from Soundgarden, and might be one of my favorite albums from the 90s. Just awesome. So, S with Soundgarden and Bad Motorfinger. T would be the album Remain in Light by the Talking Heads. Fantastic record. Sorry, these are starting to slide off. U, difficult. We're getting into some of the difficult letters. U, I have Uriah Heep, and this is their classic, Demons and Wizards. I have Magician's Birthday, the debut, and I just recently got, I think I showed in my last video. Look at Yourself. That's their best. This was an easy pick for me too. My favorite album, we're at the letter V. Vandergraaf Generator is Pawn Hearts. God Bluff is excellent as well. They have several excellent albums, but Pawn Hearts is easily my favorite of theirs. W. This was a tough one. It's Tom Waits. But I don't know. I think anybody that, well, no, maybe not everybody or anybody, but a lot of people would show Rain Dogs, and Rain Dogs is a great album. But you know what? I'm going to flash you Swordfish Trombones. Today I'm going with this as the stronger of the two. Just today. Maybe tomorrow too. This is an album that I've recently listened to quite a bit. It's only the third album that I have of theirs. But it's really good. I've been listening to this. I probably listened to it 3 times in the last few weeks, but over the other 2 albums that I have of theirs, Skylarking by Ecstasy would be my favorite. And it's actually, I don't think I mentioned it in my video before, but it's a gold stamp promo. Skylarking, Ecstasy. Couple more. Why was tough. I could have went with Neil Young, On the Beach, but I'd have to say Yes is Close to the Edge is just a masterpiece, in my opinion. And lastly, I could have went with a couple of different ones for Zed, but I went with Frank Zappa. That was I was going to say the easier part. The harder part was picking which Frank Zappa album is my favorite, because I really, really enjoy the Grand Wazoo. But I'm going with Hot Rods. So that does it. A through Z. Thank you, CalicoSilver, for that challenge. It was really fun. Once again, folks, I will leave a link to the video below if you're interested in doing the same thing. I hope you enjoyed it. Take care.